voters head to the polls to choose between the first woman president and a businessman running for his first elected office.
When I asked the campaign why they were here at the Javits Center, they pointed up. This has a literal glass ceiling, a glass ceiling they're hoping to symbolically burst through tonight with the first woman to be elected president.
I can tell you we have no glass ceiling here. We actually have a rather low ceiling and a rather small venue. It's a decidedly small venue, perhaps the smallest one I've ever seen for an event like this.
I have worn my white and purple colors of the suffragettes in honor of the fact that we have our first woman president, soon to be Hillary Clinton elected president of the United States. But the vote is sacred until the people speak. We don't celebrate. We will, of course, retain the White House with the election of Hillary Clinton. I believe we will gain the United States Senate. It will be close, but we will gain the United States Senate, and we will pick up many seats in the House of Representatives. But you point out Director Comey's comment. With his letter that he sent out, he became the leading Republican political operative in the country. He has had a tremendous impact on the lead that Hillary Clinton had, which was important to the House, Senate, and other races down ballot. People in some of these regions are voting against their own economic interest. We have to work together. They have concerns about trade. So do we. We want a trade that is not trickle-down trade, but trade that recognizes we're in a global economy. So we have to work together on all of that has gone on leading up to it. Lincoln said public sentiment is everything. We have to listen to the people and come together as we prioritize our agenda and go forward.
Where the Democrats are going to pick up seats will be in places that were formerly Republican, inner suburbs that were very Republican for much of our history, now trending more Democratic as white college-educated voters move into the Democratic column. As working class whites have moved out, white educated voters have moved into the Democratic column.
No Republican has lost this in modern history. Even Goldwater won white college-educated Republicans. So if Donald Trump, who has been losing them in polls, does not carry them tonight, I think it's going to have very interesting consequences up and down the ballot in some of these races.
Once upon a time in this country, you did have 30 or 40 congressional districts that were, when I was working at the DCCC, you really did have a lot more congressional districts that were highly contested. That number is shrinking a lot now, and it has to do with people like me who are helping to draw these maps precisely the way to keep incumbents in the office.
But, okay.
If Democrats win, how Trump reacts will be super important. If Trump wins, Democrats will be stunned, and a lot of people will be stunned. And how Clinton reacts at that moment will be super duper important.
Yeah, exactly.
Could you have done more?
Oh, no. Look, first of all, that was part of the coordinated expenditure that the candidate gets. So there's $24 million that the candidate can coordinate with the RNC. That was part of that. That wasn't an independent expenditure, which is what you were referring to in the past. But you're right. We put all of our money into the ground, into data. We spent over $175 million in data over the last 4 years in advance of this election. And like I said, the numbers don't lie. 876 staff were on the ground last cycle, 6,012 this time. But it's not just the number, it's the length. We've had them out there in some cases 2-3 years to make relationships in communities, put voter contact registration, and I think it shows. Look at our absentee and early vote numbers. We've cut that deficit huge, and I think that's what's going to propel us to victory tonight.
This seems to fit into this pattern that the Trump campaign has been making all along, that somehow the polls are going to be wiggled so that certain voters, maybe minority voters, might get special access. And I know the Trump campaign has also asked some of its own supporters to go out and watch and monitor what's going on at the polls. Have you been seeing any reports of that kind of activity that would be problematic today? This is obviously the first presidential election we've had since the Supreme Court chipped away at some significant parts of the Voting Rights Act. And one of the concerns there was that minority voters might be disenfranchised with what happens after that Supreme Court ruling. More broadly, have you seen any reports of those types of things going on?
And we have a projected winner for president in the state of Kentucky for Donald Trump, bringing 8 electoral votes to the Republican nominee for president. In the state of Vermont projected to have Hillary Clinton as the winner with its 3 electoral votes. And in the Hoosier state, Indiana, Donald Trump, another win in his column with its 11 electoral votes. It's also, of course, the home to Donald Trump's running mate, the Governor Mike Pence. We don't yet have results in the other states we mentioned, Virginia with 13 electoral votes, home to Hillary Clinton's running mate, Senator Tim Kaine. Nor do we have results yet, South Carolina with 9 electoral votes, and Georgia and its 16 electoral votes. It has been a long day of voting all across the country. Polls are still open in much of this nation at issue whether Hillary Clinton, Hillary, or Donald Trump will become the 45th president of the United States.
I mean, Georgia may be 40% minority by 2020, right? That is a state that I think you're going to see Democrats actually sort of begin to shift more money and less money in places like Indiana, where we really didn't put any money there this year either.
How much of a setback is it, the language that Donald Trump has been using throughout the campaign and what it's doing to Latino voters who are going to have a greater influence that Republicans are going to need as well?
Well, you know, Sean's got a tough job. It's a disaster. It was pretty clear after 2012, the party went through this process, so-called autopsy, that we had to do better with not just Latinos, but with all non-white voters.
We've got a projected winner in West Virginia with 5 electoral votes. It looks like it's projected to go for Donald Trump. The polls are closed, but we're still waiting for results in the key battleground states of North Carolina, and that's got 15 electoral votes up for grabs, and Ohio with its 18 electoral votes. We don't expect to have that right away.
You know, West Virginia used to be a state that went Democratic for election after election, but that changed, and now we are not surprised to see, just as the polls close, Amy, that West Virginia is declared Donald Trump territory.
Right, for one of those demographic issues we've discussed, which is white voters, especially white voters without a college education.
We do have at least one projected winner. That's in Washington, D.C., with its 3 electoral votes. Hillary Clinton, no surprise at all, a very, very blue District of Columbia. We also have a projected winner in Delaware. Hillary Clinton, the winner in that blue state. Maryland, with its 10 electoral votes, Hillary Clinton projected the winner there. Massachusetts Hillary Clinton projected the winner with its 11 electoral votes. And Illinois, the state where Clinton was born, with its 20 electoral votes, she is also projected to be the winner there.
We can now report Donald Trump is also the projected winner in South Carolina with 9 electoral votes.
So we have some results, and on the presidential side and on the Senate side as well. Again, no surprise, Donald Trump projected winner in Mississippi with its 6 electoral votes. We're still waiting on, I guess we do have 2 other calls to make: Oklahoma, the Sooner state, and Tennessee, the volunteer state. Donald Trump declared or projected to be the winner there. As we said a few minutes ago, Hillary Clinton projected to take Delaware and Rhode Island. So we are, Hari, beginning to get a picture from these early states. But as Amy Walter just said, the ones that we're all waiting for, that we're sitting here talking about, we've been talking about for weeks, they're not in yet.
There's talk right now that, and this will be amazing, that the turnout in Philadelphia may exceed 2008, which was a record. So they'll have over 70% turnout. And you know what other things good campaigns do? They put rallies in places for a purpose.
Oh, it's not just a coincidence that Hillary Clinton was there with John Bon Jovi
and the boss.
That's right.
Gender gap in some places is just gigantic. In Virginia, for example, among women, who are 53% of the electorate, Clinton is winning by 19 points. Among men, Trump is only winning by 5. That's just a big number, and it's hard to see how he possibly wins Virginia if these numbers are accurate. North Carolina is a little different. So she's winning among women by 14, and he's winning by men among 12. So that's a little closer. North Carolina looks to be a closer state.
We were expecting that she would get Obama-esque numbers amongst African-American voters. She's actually getting relatively normal African-American vote percentages relative to other Democratic candidates. She's in the high 80s and low 90s. That is unusual. We'll see whether or not that holds over time, but it doesn't look like she's getting, in many cases, 95% of the African-American vote.
Democrats have, for how many elections, counted heavily on the African-American vote.
They have. I mean, as Stuart pointed out earlier, it was the cataclysm of 1964. that led the Democrats to become the party of African-American voters, and that and the Voting Rights Act of 1965.
Right now, it's fairly subdued here. There's a lot of people milling around behind me. This is a relatively small venue, actually the smallest venue I think I've ever seen for this kind of gathering. It's subdued at the moment, partly because of the size, partly because it's early, but probably mostly perhaps for the reason you've all just been talking about, is that so far what's been happening are the expected results. We've heard some applause at some of the early results at places like Kentucky. Obviously, there's some pause because we're just getting something behind me. There's some pause at some of the states that haven't been called early on, like Georgia, like Virginia, like Pennsylvania. People here that I'm talking to continue to feel very confident. That's what they're saying. The places that they haven't called, like Virginia, Pennsylvania, they have said from the beginning, and they said to me even a little earlier today from the Trump campaign, very challenging places, but they remain hopeful.
It's interesting, Jeff, that they decided to call it a celebration, and as you said, sort of deliberately chose a smaller venue rather than what you would normally see on an election night. I mean, we think back to Grant Park in Chicago in 2008 with Barack Obama.
This is not Grant Park, I could tell you that. It's not even where John is over at the Javits Center, not that far away. No, we were told that Donald Trump wanted this kind of a small venue. It's this is a large hotel, one of these very large New York hotels, a very large ballroom, and anybody who's been to a conference of any size knows that they can make the room of any size they want. Well, this one they've deliberately shrunk to the size it is. So I'm surrounded by hundreds of fellow journalists in the media, camera crews everywhere, but you can see behind me several hundreds, not thousands, of Trump supporters here behind me.
Judy, it sounds like it's a little more lively here. They are keeping up the energy. They're pumping in music. They're showing the networks calling races. A big cheer went up when one of the networks called Illinois for Hillary Clinton. And they're also showing Hillary Clinton campaign commercials on a big screen here, sort of the greatest hits of the campaign. That's also certainly keeping the energy level up here. They're also cheering as they see raw vote totals come in. One that they're keeping a very close eye on here is Florida. The Clinton campaign officials say they really don't see how Donald Trump could get to 270 without Florida, and Florida is a place they feel very good about. From their field reports today and also last week, they were already ballyhooing the fact that even before the election, they had the turnout of Latinos in early voting was already 30% higher than Latino early voting in all of 2012. So they're pointing us to look at that, and also talking about they like what they see coming out of North Carolina. But it's a much different, sounds like it's a much different mood here at the Javits Center.
You know, John, throughout this campaign, Donald Trump has spoken a lot about the large crowds he has drawn different parts of the country in the tens of thousands. Hillary Clinton doesn't seem has drawn crowds that big. She did have 30,000 the other night. But in general, her crowds, do the Clinton people say it's because they haven't tried to build crowds, or are they defensive about it? What do they say?
It really wasn't until the closing days that you saw that. Even in the last week, the crowds were not terribly large or enthusiastic. They were putting their emphasis into building a ground operation.
Historically, it's been sort of South Florida, your population areas, Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beach County. Those are the Democratic areas. The Panhandle is the conservative Republican area, and then the I-4 corridor between is kind of the fulcrum that they battle on, the candidates. This time, though, the demographic shifts are such that the Miami-Dade, a big margin there with so many Hispanic voters, and also Orlando area, so many Puerto Rican Hispanics. That may be able to overcome anything anywhere else. Donald Trump is actually doing reasonably well in parts of Tampa Bay, where I am.
If I was going to ask you about that Hispanic turnout, we've been hearing a lot about it in Florida, that it was much better than expected. What are you seeing?
Yeah, definitely much better than expected, and there's been a big push in the tail end. The Clinton campaign really focused. They had a big operation all along, but they really focused overwhelmingly Miami-Dade and the area around Orlando, which has just been exploding with Puerto Ricans. We have this unusual situation where the Cuban Americans, as you know, Judy, have historically been very Republican. They've been trending less so. But I think the Clinton goal was to get an even bigger margin in Miami-Dade than Obama did. It's been the ongoing story that the crowds seem much more enthusiastic, energetic, big at the Trump events than at the Hillary events. But clearly, Barack Obama going to Duval County, going to Miami, one of the big stories so far that I think looks good for Hillary Clinton is that Duval County, that's Jacksonville area, it's basically a Republican stronghold with a lot of black voters, is much closer than a lot of us would have thought otherwise. And I think that's a function of the Clinton campaign really doing a last-minute push there.
Were you able to expand that map in the last few days? I mean, we saw the decisions to go to places like Michigan.
Absolutely. There was a great decision. State of Michigan is in play. We'll win it for the first time since 1988 for a Republican. And that state is so open to Donald Trump's message because of how hurt it's been by the Clinton-Obama economy. So I'm just hearing some good news behind me. I wish I could turn around and see what it is, but I assume it's great. And we're very excited for more as the night rolls on.
Any regrets on the part of Donald Trump, the people around him, about his language, particularly early in the campaign, but as the campaign wore on, about Latinos, about the wall, because there does now seem clearly to be a much, much higher turnout in the Latino community, and it appears it may favor Hillary Clinton.
No, there's no regrets. And by the way, the Latino community is very diverse. And there you have to look at Puerto Ricans, you have to look at Cubans, of course, and we're doing well with the Cuban community. So we're very confident that Mr. Trump has run a great campaign. His message on illegal immigration has been very strong because that secures our country, secures our border, and that's exactly what Americans want. And his message on the economy, bringing back jobs, appeals to people of all backgrounds.
Well, first of all, I'm smiling because you can sense the energy here at Javits Center in New York City. We had thousands of people pouring in for what we hope is going to be a celebration tonight of the first woman president of the United States. You know, we actually felt really good coming into Election Day because of the work that we did. Hillary just campaigned her heart out in these battleground states. We had 43 million Americans already vote before we even got to Election Day, and we were seeing really strong turnout for Hillary in important states like Florida, Nevada, and North Carolina. So we were feeling good coming into Election Day, but we feel really good tonight with the results that we're already seeing in those really crucial states. So we're going to see historic turnout of Latinos and Asian Pacific Islanders. You know, they were voting, even in the early vote, double the rate that they were in 2012. And we know from our data that 1/3 of those voters are first-time voters. They didn't vote in the last election. So that really speaks to the registration effort we ran in Florida and the hard work we've been doing there to get out our supporters. And it really speaks to how Hillary has been connecting with the Hillary coalition that we think is going to put her over the top tonight, which is Latinos, African Americans, Asian Pacific Islanders, millennials, and suburban women who we really think are coming together to give her that victory.
Michigan, a state that has gone blue for as long as many of us can remember, because Donald Trump seemed to be narrowing the gap there. Just how close is Michigan? How concerned are you about it?
You know, Michigan was a state that we had Hillary campaign in late because it's a game day state. All of the voting happens on Election Day, other than other states. Oh, I'm sorry. I think we're about to do the national anthem, so we probably have to take a pause here.
We will forgive you that, and we hope to have you back again soon. Christina Shockey with the Clinton campaign.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Let's look at a graphic about that diversity that Boris Epstein was talking about in Florida with Hispanics. You know, we have in Miami-Dade County there at the south, that's the green dot. That is heavily Cuban, and there is actually a House race down there that we're going to be watching all night. But look at those yellow dots in the center. That's the I-4 corridor. That's where it's not just Cuban, but heavy Puerto Rican, different types of Hispanics. We're seeing different types of voting trends, but it looks like Marco Rubio, Cuban heritage, has won the state overall, regardless.
Speaking of Florida right now, going back to what they were talking about earlier with with the surge in voters there. That, if you look from the early exits there, that electorate there looks a lot less white than it was in 2012. It's about 6 points less white, and it's a little younger than it was early on. So I think sort of what you're seeing with the Clinton campaign doing on the ground is certainly bearing out in some of the exit polls.
If Trump's going to pull something off, so far I don't see.
So, Amy, that could be good news for Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, we're still waiting, it sounds like, on some of the most populous of the counties in Florida to come in. Broward County, still all of Miami-Dade to come in. But it doesn't, this feels like, I think David's exactly right, it feels like what we're seeing is the Democratic areas becoming that much more Democratic, but the Republican areas are holding strong. Now, where they're not holding as strong as we can see in some states, at least in the exit polls in Pennsylvania, for example, in North Carolina, where white women are not, he's not doing as well with those voters, not doing as well with suburban women voters, women with a college education in a place like Pennsylvania and New Hampshire.
Trump performs well among men, and he performs well among people without a college degree.
Right. That's going to have interesting consequences tonight, and it looks like he's doing better in Florida than I thought he was going to do. It's super tight. But the group of people who are decreasing in our demographics are high school or less white voters. They're just about under 4% less every 4 years. So that is a group that, sure, you want to win that group, but you're sort of winning a percentage of customers that are declining.
I think in some ways we forgot that moments of progress are often met with moments of resistance, and we've seen that resistance emerge, especially with Donald Trump's being able to make these racial appeals. The notion that whites without a college education are voting strongly Trump is fine. It makes sense. It fits the populist tenor of his campaign. I think the question is, well, what does this say about the longevity of the Republican Party as it's constructed right now? And the Republican Party still has a lot of soul searching to do as a result of that.
And can I jump in to that point, though? It does sort of shift around some of the battlegrounds, right? So you would expect him to do better in Ohio, right? You would expect them to do better in a New Hampshire's, right, where you do have sort of that electorate that looks sort of a lot wider, a little older, and a little more blue collar, and Iowa the same. But at the same time, you see Democrats making some gains further south. So I think you see some of the map shifting around because of this.
Reporting in North Carolina a few weekends ago about this in particular, and that is looking at women, in particular college-educated women who did go nationally for Mitt Romney by several points in the last election, but this time a number of them were reluctant to support Donald Trump. How do you see that? The gender divide, and in particular, if you put gender together with higher education?
Well, Judy, I think where we're seeing that play out tonight is in your big suburban and urban areas, Mecklenburg County, where Charlotte is, Wake County, where I am here in Raleigh, and you're seeing big numbers, big deltas between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton.
The education divide that we're starting to see in the American electorate this year. Now we're waiting to see how it develops tonight, but this would be something new on the political landscape, wouldn't it?
Well, it would be. I mean, historically, the college-educated voters have supported Republican candidates. Bill Clinton lost college-educated voters in '92. And won with white blue-collar voters who didn't have a college education. That's where it was. I mean, so I think there's no question. But I think the question that remains is whether Donald Trump is sui generis, whether he's a one-off. I mean, if Republicans can come back and be competitive, because these are people, I think, that the cultural and social issues have turned off them from Republicans in many cases. So they have a challenge in trying to re-engage them, but they have been a natural fit for Republicans over a generation. Their comfort level has been with Republicans.
And this is the great demographic challenge Republicans have faced with non-white voters. So more people are college educated than not college educated every election. So you need to be doing better with those people, particularly if you're not doing as well with non-white voters. So I hope that there's going to be a recognition that these voters to stay Republican, even though Donald Trump may have turned some of them off.
Donald Trump doesn't seem exceptional. I mean, he looks like a Republican. And for all the weirdness of the Trump campaign, when you actually are looking at the numbers, he looks like a generic Republican.
You have elements of bigotry that have resonated within the party, and that's not good for the health of the country. So how does the Republican Party bring all of these people together and actually bring people along and carry them to a better place?
I think the Republican Party has to do a lot of soul searching about being able to reach out more to a broader, more diverse country. The one thing we know about America is it's getting less white. And that's going to continue for some time unless white people can figure out how to quit dying.
We don't know how this night is going to turn out, but what he has shown is that the white vote, if you will, is not going away quietly.
Well, no, he's in fact he's consolidated a lot, and I think the interesting thing for Republicans is this: you have a lot of that vote that's more Trump than it is Republican. Right, and when you look at that side, that Trump supporter, his favorables are higher than Ryan or Mitt Romney's. Right, so what happens after Election Day when the establishment tries to reestablish themselves over the Republican Party and continue to try to shun Donald Trump? Right now, I think you have a surge in voters right now that are more about Trump than they are about the Republican Party.
David Brooks, that tells us, I think you said this a few minutes ago, it's maybe a long night.
Yeah, it seemed like in the last few days there was a lot of Democratic, the panic of a week or two ago after Comey, then a lot of confidence. Oh, the polls are converging. She's got like a 4-point lead. It looks pretty. You look at the New York Times upshot projections, 83% chance of winning. That's dropping. He's outperforming the recent vibe, and so it's not to say he's necessarily going to win, but it's going to be a longer night and a closer night than some of us thought, and I'm not sure why. I'm not sure where. I think maybe more white voters. I'm not quite seeing where his vote is coming from, because she's doing pretty well among the people you'd expect her to do well, and as we mentioned earlier, some of the gender gaps are pretty big, but somewhere he's pulling out, when we look at the actual votes, he's doing okay.
Gender gaps aren't as big as we thought that they were going to be. And even some of the racial gaps aren't as big as we thought they were going to be. So right now, Hillary Clinton is performing like an average Democrat amongst African Americans and almost an average Democrat amongst Latinos. So she's going to have to post bigger numbers amongst these groups in some of these key states in order to really pull off decisive victories.
We are going to be projecting Donald Trump the winner in a few states. North Dakota, with its 3 electoral votes. South Dakota, another 3 electoral votes going to Donald Trump. Wyoming, 3 more electoral votes. All of these reliably red states. Kansas with 6 electoral votes. Nebraska with 5 more. And the state of Texas, this is the jackpot so far this evening, 38 electoral votes, the second largest in the country after California, going to Donald Trump.
All right, we also have some results with Hillary Clinton, the projected winner in the state of New York, with 29 electoral votes. And that is all we have for Hillary at the moment.
Virginia's interesting to me. I mean, Virginia's a state that Lyndon Johnson carried and then voted 10 times in a row Republican. It was a very reliably Republican. And it did look, as Jeff Greenfield mentioned earlier, that it was for the 3rd time in a row was going to go Democratic. And it appears, correct me if I'm wrong, but it appears to be a real fight. Where Trump is running up the score is in the plain states where there are no people and a lot of geography. I mean, you can win the Dakotas and Wyoming, but it just doesn't. Texas, of course, is the one big state that, with electoral votes, the second largest, that is reliably red.
Yes, you know what may be happening here, all of us know that for decades, people on the right have been saying the right candidate can summon up these missing millions of white voters who haven't found a candidate that has spoken to them. That was Ted Cruz's presumption when he was running. Now, it's early in the evening, but what we seem to be seeing in terms of Trump's overperformance is that he may be redeeming this long-held dream of some conservatives, that he is bringing out voters. The very nature that has driven more moderate Republicans away from him may have triggered a sense of enthusiasm that is producing this closer election than I think almost everybody in our neck of the woods assumed.
Here it is. All right. In the state of Arkansas, Donald Trump, the projected winner here. Hillary Clinton was the first lady of the state of Arkansas. Her husband, Bill Clinton, was twice the governor.
By a wide
Arkansas
margin,
has gone from, yes, well, I think it's still early in the evening, but wouldn't be surprised if it's a pretty significant margin. But over the time, Cornell Belcher, since Bill Clinton was governor, Arkansas has gone a lot redder.
It's gone away, and the encyclopedia that Mark has talked about this earlier. I mean, this West Virginia, Arkansas, I mean, they're in the same sort of vein with these really sort of blue-collar white states.
I thought it wouldn't be this tight, but I mean, can you imagine him getting to 270, to Trump getting to 270? I think you can begin to imagine how that might happen. If he can win North Carolina, Ohio, and Florida, he gets close, and then he needs to surprise us in some place. And then if he's having a much better night than we think, then Michigan and Minnesota look like places where he could begin to surprise us. And so,
or Wisconsin.
Or Wisconsin. So I'm not sure it's going to happen, but you can imagine it.
You know, I'm not a Trump guy, so I don't find that encouraging. But I mean, you have to give them credit. They are doing much better in Florida than I would have thought, and it's going to. Of course, Florida's usually tight, but we're going to just have to see how this plays out.
What about this conversation we were having a minute or two around this table around frankly, the white vote, that the Republicans, that there's something about Donald Trump that has tapped into that?
Yeah, I don't think it's encouraging.
Well, I got to tell you, Hari, as the race is getting closer in, say, Florida and North Carolina, the campaign folks have sort of disappeared from the floor. We were hoping to talk to some people in this hour, but we've now been told that they're unavailable when they had previously said they would be available. So I think that there may be some nervousness watching these raw votes. They had been telling us that they were confident about the turnout, get out the vote operation,
Hey, John, hold on
and
just
also
a
the
second.
early voting operation.
Hold on just a second. I think we've got a call to make, and I think that's the state of Connecticut, and that is projected for Hillary Clinton at 56% and 40% just very early in the night. But John, continue with what you're saying.
Well, that's Connecticut's a state that Donald Trump had gone to late in the game, where they thought they might have something. But I think that there's still there seems to be some, as I say, they've sort of disappeared. They had been out here doing. Talking to us and talking to television networks, but they seem to have gone back behind closed doors. I don't know what that means, but the raw vote numbers are getting tighter. The lead, Donald Trump opening up leads in Florida and a number of other states. So we'll have to see what that means as the night goes on.
That's interesting that the Clinton headquarters, they are having a powwow of some sort, possibly. Maybe that's what's going on.
Let's go a few blocks away to campaign headquarters of the Trump campaign, Jeff Brown in Midtown Manhattan as well. Jeff, are you seeing the enthusiasm there increase with how close these races are getting?
Yeah, it's getting a little bit more raucous here. We just had our first chant of USA, USA, as the Fox News monitor showed a number of wins for Donald Trump. Again, these are not surprise wins, so there's that. We're hearing it a little bit more of a buzz in the room. I think people that we've talked to, as with John, they're not talking so much anymore, but they're still expressing the confidence that they were telling us about earlier. That after all that's happened, you know, after all that we went through with whatever it is, the FBI and Donald Trump on the bus, the video, that we went back and forth, and we had a lot of shifts of enthusiasm. But a lot of what we're seeing now, a lot of the support, the positives and negatives, were there from the beginning. And I'm just looking one thing at some of the exit polling that we're seeing from Pennsylvania, for example, where both candidates were yesterday on the last day of the campaign. It said 77% of the voters in preliminary exit poll results say they made up their minds by September. So I throw that out to all of you back there in Washington of what we're seeing tonight.
Here's an example of an exit poll. Andra Gillespie, look at this with us from Pennsylvania.
Well, it looks like Hillary Clinton is winning resoundingly amongst college-educated white women, and she's losing amongst women who don't have college degrees who are white. So it fits the pattern that we've been talking about.
How did women vote today for president? When you look at women and Hillary Clinton won women in the state of New Hampshire by a very large margin, 53% to 41%.
What's really pretty fascinating thing to watch, though, in the state is how class and how education have really sort of flipped the normal models that you normally see when it comes to a traditional Republican versus Democratic presidential race. So you have towns in the northern part of the state or the central part of the state, former mill towns, former manufacturing towns, that have traditionally been pretty heavily Democratic, that have become more and more Trump, in some cases he is winning these towns. However, when you get closer to the Massachusetts border, and remember the border of New Hampshire in Massachusetts to Boston's about a half hour, is these bedroom communities. These are the highly educated, pretty well paid individuals. Those folks have been basically the bedrock of the Republican base in New Hampshire. However, this is where you go town by town by town. Hillary Clinton is doing better because she obviously does better among college-educated whites.
We do have a result now to tell you about. Donald Trump, the projected winner in Louisiana. David Brooks, you and Mark have been whispering to each other.
Well, I have one
like
that
bad schoolboys.
I just want to put to rest this idea that the Joe College and Betty Co-ed are leaving the campus to join the Young Democrats. In Texas, where the supposedly white college graduates were offended by Donald Trump's behavior, his language, his conduct, and everything else. The exit polls from Texas among white college graduates, 31% of voters in the state, 30% Clinton, 63% Trump.
We should put this in context. Right now, the S&P futures markets are collapsing because it's now a 50-50. It's a toss-up election. And the thing I can see is, and some of the women are not going, we talked about this a little earlier tonight, not going as big for Clinton as we would have thought. In Florida, 51%, New Hampshire, 53%, Michigan, 53%. So for all the charges of harassment, the tapes, the misogyny, what I think was clear misogyny, maybe politics or ideology or class is trumping gender tonight.
Let's be very candid here. I don't think there was a person within the political and journalistic world 5 hours ago that thought Trump had a chance of winning this thing. And one of the central things that all of us may have overlooked was how powerful the change argument is, particularly running against a Democratic candidate who, whatever her assets, is very hard to sell as a creature of change, even if she is, it would be the first woman president. And I think that dynamic might be explaining the shockwaves that are going through the political community right about now. You're seeing now, I think, in a lot of states, this, in the rural areas, a turnout that I think has surprised and baffled a lot of people. And I'm suggesting that particularly for that constituency, the argument of change, the argument that you've been left behind, the argument that the people in charge of the system have not respected you and have not met your needs may turn out to be a much more powerful force than many of us, myself included, might have assumed.
Let me ask you bluntly about the question of race. We've talked about it tonight. It's been the subject of a lot of reporting, Donald Trump's appeal. He's clearly doing well with white voters, having a harder time with minorities, with African Americans, with Latino vote. Of course, we're still waiting to see what the final results are. How do you think about that as an issue for your party, what it says about whether Donald Trump wins or loses this year?
Well, it's interesting looking not just at this election, but maybe the last 5 or 6 presidential elections. The Democratic Party has really solidified its hold on certain non-white racial groups, expressly bidding to those groups, saying, we the Democrat Party are protecting your entity as a racial group. The Republican Party has never really made appeals like that. It's always made sort of broad appeals to the general population. These are principles you should identify with. And I think we're seeing over time that the Democrats have successfully locked in a large number of people in some of those minority racial groups. So I don't think it's a Trump thing. I think it's a Republican-Democrat thing, and it's been going on for quite some time now. It's more of a pandering. It's more of a, you should vote for us because of your racial group and because we, the Democrat Party, will do a better job of protecting your interests defined not as an American, but your interests defined as a member of this racial group. And they've been very successful at that. Now, I think we Republicans often hope that, well, our general message to the broad public will appeal and it will overcome that very specific message that the Democrats have delivered. But in election after election, that hasn't happened.
And I think interesting there at the end, Andra Gillespie, to hear the perception of somebody who's clearly a Republican, clearly supporting Donald Trump, saying the Democrats have done something that helps them some of the time, but doesn't help them all the time.
So the frame was very interesting in that it was suggesting that the Democrats took minority voters captive, and it doesn't suggest that minority voters have agency in picking parties and candidates that they feel will actually better represent their interests.
Even in this campaign, the bigotry was not hidden. I mean, Donald Trump wanted to ban Muslims. I mean, and he said these things about Mexicans and rapists and all that. It was not hidden. There's clearly a racial element in this election and this result, which we're seeing tonight. And we're seeing big, like I'm looking at Michigan now, Trump's doing a lot better than Mitt Romney did, and because of white rural voters.
Trump might be doing 1 percentage point better amongst African Americans than Mitt Romney did, but other than that, this does not look like he's made inroads amongst minority populations.
But where he's,
I was going to say, go ahead.
You know, before this election, among white voters without a college degree, the biggest margin that we'd seen was Ronald Reagan in his blowout election in 1984. He won white non-college voters with 66%. If you look in some of these early exit polls, I'm looking at Florida, he's winning Trump with white non-college voters 64%. He's getting 66% of white non-college voters in Michigan. So he's hitting those record number levels even as the percent of white non-college voters has declined.
You know, David, you were mentioning the S&P futures. I kind of bothered to look them up. They're down about 3.3%, and the Dow futures are down about anywhere between 450 and 500 points.
As the Democrats are the party of big business.
Well, certainly the party.
We're searching for a term to describe the Democrats.
We have Montana. Projected winner there is Donald Trump. No surprise.
She's just not getting those margins among younger voters, not getting the margins we would have thought she would have seen. We would have seen among Latino voters. 65% is an impressive number, but it is not in the 70, 80% category.
Let's be clear, the path now runs through Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Nevada, and she's got to have Virginia. When you start doing the electoral math right now, if he takes one of those, done.
We have a state that we can call for Hillary Clinton, is that right? The state of New Mexico. Let's see what we have here. All right. The land of enchantment. New Mexico going for Hillary Clinton, not a surprise. This was a state she was expected
But it
to
was
win.
a state that Trump made a late play in.
Yep.
Right?
He did.
And with the hope that Gary Johnson would pull enough of the vote away. And this was a state that until recently, and by recently meaning to 2008 election, this was a very, very competitive state. So the fact that she put that one in her column is good news.
We're surprised that Hillary Clinton isn't getting 90% of the African American vote or 75% of the Latino vote. So this is a group that really is, for the first time in recent memory, voting in a self-conscious bloc. I think it's fair to say. You know, we talk about the diminishing size of a constituency. The Democrats have made great efforts at the LGBTQ community. I mean, they've been prideful about it. They've been active about it and visible about it. It's 5%, 5% of the electorate. Okay, and you know, this is 40%. And I think it's fair to say that while the face of that group had been Norma Ray in American culture, under Norman Lear, and it became Archie Bunker.
Another call that we can make at this point, I think this is the state of Missouri, is going to go in Donald Trump's column at 60%. That was that expected, Stuart Stevens?
Yes.
John, you know, our guest pool has evaporated in some ways from the folks that we've been trying to line up from the Clinton camp to appear on the broadcast. What have you got?
I'm sorry, we're here with former Governor Jennifer Granholm of Michigan. Governor, your state has been big in this campaign in the last couple of days. Hillary Clinton went back. President Obama went back. What's going on in your state? What's going on in your state right now?
Well, I do think that there is a very real economic anxiety that is reflected in many other states too, but particularly acute in Michigan. And so Trump's message about trade resonated. Her message about trade as well. They had kind of actually a similar message. We shouldn't be doing trade agreements unless they create jobs in America. So that was a really powerful message for Michigan. You know, I think Michigan, it's going to be very close. goes, but I think in the end it will go to her. In fact, one of the newspapers, the Free Press, has called it for her already tonight. So we'll see whether that pans out, but the bottom line is Michigan is always a close state. In fact, let me just say this. I was a Democratic governor, but I had a Republican House, a Republican Senate, a Republican Supreme Court, a Republican Attorney General, a Republican Secretary of State. So everybody assumes it's a Democratic state because in presidential years it usually does since 1988, but it's not always true. It's a divided state.
There's been a lot of talk also in the closing days of the campaign about black turnout, the turnout of the African-American vote. What are you hearing about the turnout in Wayne County and Detroit?
Yeah, I mean, I think as we always worry, when there's rain, the turnout is depressed. And there was a bit of rain today. The Detroit vote is not as high as we wanted it to be. But here's, I think, where she may have made it up is in the Latino vote, which there's 5% of our population is Latino, and in the Arab American vote, which there's about 300,000 Arab Americans in the Wayne County area. They came out overwhelmingly for her. So it may have been offset, the lower turnout. We'll see how it comes out, though.
The energy level has raised from when we were talking an hour or two ago. The room has filled up. It's a much more loud and talkative and paying attention to all of these races. And interestingly enough, as they're incomplete results that we're seeing because so many of these key races are so tied. But as the results are shown, this crowd cheers because that means that's very good for this hall to see how close, how competitive, and the increasing possibility that Mr. Trump will win some of these key races. I should say that this crowd is largely and overwhelmingly a white crowd.
But Emily Ramshaw, we know, too, that Democrats have pointed at Texas, that not that they predicted they were going to win it, but they keep saying, well, this is a state with a rising Latino vote, some African-American vote, and frankly, enough well-educated white voters who are may for the Democratic Party may be able to appeal to them, that the Republicans can't count on Texas forever. We do have a call to make in the all-important state of Ohio, and that is Donald Trump is projected the winner. As you can see right now, not all the votes are in, but it has been expected that Trump would win. But this is, you have to say, David Brooks, the Democrats were hoping they could pull it out. Hillary Clinton spent a lot of time there, especially earlier on in this race. They may not need it to win, but it sure would have been nice for the Democrats.
Yeah, and obviously it was the swingiest of the swing states for a couple terms. It wasn't quite that swingy this time because it's a more white state and industrial state. You just have to look at the map that we're looking at right now and think that the economic anxiety, Jennifer Granholm talked about this a little earlier, that the Republican arguments on trade and immigration and the deindustrialization arguments were just dominant because that's where he's doing really well, a lot of those places.
Another state to call right now, and this is one we've been waiting for since 7 o'clock, Hillary Clinton. The winner in the state of Virginia. She's projected the winner. This one, Amy Walter, took a lot longer than I think some people thought it would.
It did, although I am reminded, and I should do this every year, is just go back and remember how long some of these states take, and Northern Virginia is notoriously slow at getting their returns in. And so when Northern Virginia came in, this, again, it is a more diverse part of the state. A lot of white college-educated voters, a lot of younger voters. That is likely what put her over the top. Hillary Clinton did 9 points better than Barack Obama in Arlington County, which is a heavily Democratic area, right? We're in it right now. Buchanan County, which is a more rural county that is much smaller, but she did 13 points worse. And Buchanan County, by the way, the percent of the electorate that is white and has a college degree is 9%.
And someone would argue that Virginia and its sister state, sort of North Carolina, are beginning to sort of resemble each other, especially when you look at the triangle there, Research Triangle, North Carolina. Does it begin to sort of look more like Northern Virginia? And Tidewater, which is also very key there, coming in there. It is one of the states that's getting more educated and less white, and we're holding on to those.
When Donald Trump laid out his agenda consistently, whether it was immigration, security, building a wall, repealing or replacing Obamacare, renegotiating trade agreements, talking about more conservative judges, energy, infrastructure, lower taxes, I think those were things that people started saying, you know what, that is different, that is new, I want to do that. Hillary Clinton is an excellent candidate, as you know, but people still can't tell you 5 things she stands for.
I believe it's a presidential. Yes, it is. Hillary Clinton declared the winner in the Centennial State. You can see not all the votes are in. They're only in the hundreds of thousands.
The sense I got on the street, one of the big concerns was, would the large African-American population in Philadelphia embrace Hillary in the numbers that they did Barack Obama? That there would be a concern, there would be a letdown as the first African-American president left office. And my sense going around the city today and talking to a lot of African-American folks, ward leaders and visiting polling places, was they met every expectation in terms of turnout. So the battle then turns to other parts of the state, particularly the Philadelphia suburbs, where Donald Trump needs to do well, and I think that's the big question that remains.
When you look at that map, it seems that the corners or pockets of blue are just in the urban areas, Pittsburgh, and maybe a little bit around Allentown and right in Philly, and then just huge swaths of red.
Yeah, they call it the T. I mean, if you look at the southeast and southwestern portions of the state where Democrats reside in great numbers, you have the center and then the northwestern and northeastern edges kind of creating a T, and that's always been the Republican strongholds. I mean, the Republicans will probably carry 55 of the state's 67 counties, but you know, 1/3 of the registered voters in the state live in the 5-county Philadelphia area, so that's a huge, huge battleground.
Ronald Reagan said, listen to Michael Beschloss, Ronald Reagan's job rating is on Election Day of 1988 was 56% favorable, the same as Barack Obama's, which is interesting. Then he got a boost on the way out. But I mean, I just thought with Barack Obama at 56%, campaigning as hard as he did, I thought it would give her a boost. Maybe it gave her a boost. Maybe she was at 39 and he got her to 44.
We have a call to make. This is a big one. The state of Florida, which has held other presidential elections in the balance, we are projecting that Donald Trump will be the winner in the Sunshine State.
You know, we spent a lot of time talking about women and the gender gap. Really, I think, and the race gap. I think we need to talk about the fact that men are turning out at a much higher proportion for Donald Trump than we've seen in recent elections. He's winning right now. This is the national poll that he's winning men by 12 points. Romney won men by 7. Hillary Clinton is winning women by 12, but that's sort of normal for what Democratic candidates get. So it's a wash when it comes to the gender gap, and that is particularly notable.
For a long time, the dirty little secret has been that many Republican leaders wanted Donald Trump to lose. So I think speaking out in these states, as some did, if you look at Mike Lee, if you look in Nebraska, it's interesting.
Mark Shields?
I give Stewart credit for great candor, because that's absolutely true. I mean, there are all kinds of people planning to go to Iowa tomorrow. I mean, Tom Cotton, Arkansas, has already been there. Ben Sass of Nebraska had adamantly and honorably refused to support Donald Trump from the beginning. Mitt Romney had emerged as sort of a mythical figure, as a man of conscience. And all of that, I mean, is going to be, if not forgotten, at least discounted, if in fact Donald Trump puts it together.
David Brooks?
Yeah, I mean, the one fact that he won Ohio by 11 so far is big, because Wisconsin and Michigan, where he's up by 2 or 3 with about 60% in, are a little more like Ohio than other places.
Yep. Right.
And so that's significant.
But we don't know everything, and we don't know who's going to be the winner. What we are reading on the news wire services is that the markets, financial markets around the world, the Asian markets, the Mexican peso, are plunging because Donald Trump seems to be edging closer to a possible victory.
Yes, I'm calling this election for Vladimir Putin. He's having a good night. Even if she squeaks through, she's not going to squeak through with any sort of mandate, any sort of wind at her back.
Mark Shields?
The dirty little secret among Republicans was they not only wanted Donald Trump leadership, wanted him to lose, they wanted him to lose big. And whatever happens tonight, he's not losing big. There's no reason for him to go away.
Hillary Clinton is the projected winner in the state with the most electoral votes. California, that's with 55 electoral votes. Washington State with 12 electoral votes. And Hawaii with 4 electoral votes. And Donald Trump is projected winner in Idaho with 4 electoral votes.
Stewart?
Yes, you know, I'm from the Republican Party that was anti-Putin and wasn't for 45% or 35% trade barriers. But you have to say that other part of the party is having a good night tonight. Donald Trump, to a degree, I think that people can't really focus on would be a change in foreign policy, more so than any nominee we've had. You know, I don't consider that positive.
So people were expecting that there might be rifts along gender lines. Right now, the exit poll suggests that there's an 80-20 split. One of the things that I noticed going into this race was that at church there was a lot of talk about these elections. And I attend an evangelical church, and they also framed it in terms of globalism. The court probably had more to do with it, but there was also this fear of globalism, kind of tying it to theology and eschatology about the end times.
Meaning the Supreme Court
nominees,
and
abortion and other types of things. But there was also this discomfort and this dis-ease, if you will, with globalism and this notion that America was giving up too much of its sovereignty. So that's the objection to trade, but it also ties into things like Brexit. How much do you give to entities like the UN, to the World Trade Organization, and other types of things? And I think we're seeing that reflected in this vote.
Well, this country is much more diverse than Europe. That you know, that because Europe or because the UK is so overwhelmingly white, that we couldn't have the same sort of election in a country like ours, where, again, if you said to me this morning, the electorate's going to be 70% white, that suggested that it was going to look better for Hillary Clinton than it did for Barack Obama. And I think Andre's already made this point. Not only is he doing better among non-college white voters, rural areas, running up the score in places that Romney did well but not as well, but that she's not doing as well with Latino voters, African American voters, and Asian voters. Some of those going to third-party voters, but she's not getting any bigger of a margin among those groups than Barack Obama.
And that's the problem, and it's because and we've always been, the whole sort of the year, we're worrying about this protest votes, like what percentage of the electorate is actually going to go out and cast this protest vote. It seems as though a lot of the electorate is casting this protest vote, and it is that if you told me that 70% of the electorate was going to be white this time around, I said, I don't think we'd sit here worried right now. But apparently, those protest voters were serious about their protest votes. And her percentage, by the way, she's doing even less well among white voters than Barack Obama did, more to that polarization. So she's doing less well with white voters and less well with minority voters than Barack Obama.
All right, we have a state to call, North Carolina, one we've been sitting here waiting for, and that is that Donald Trump is the projected winner in the Tar Heel state.
We've got just the change issue, but it could be the social issues, the transgenders issues. Maybe Democrats got a little ahead of where the country is, and there was a recoil. It'd be very possible to think that.
We've got a couple more results now to tell you about. One more presidential in Oregon. At this point, Hillary Clinton would have to sweep all Pennsylvania, Nevada, New Hampshire, and Wisconsin.
And Wisconsin for Hillary, yes.
Right?
I mean, and remember, Nevada's a keep. That wouldn't be flipping a state.
For the presidential, you're saying, or for the Senate?
Yeah. But is Amy, with Wisconsin Senate going Republican, does that
there's
now,
no way,
there's no way the
Democrats
now
win the majority.
take control of the
Could I make one piece of nickel knowledge? And that is, in the history of the United States, one senator has been defeated and then come back 6 years later and beaten the senator who beat him. That was Peter Gary in Rhode Island. In 1928, he lost. He came back and beat Felix Ebert in 1934. Nobody. Russ Feingold,
didn't cover that race.
No, but Russ Feingold. That is a tough thing to do. Ron Johnson.
And he was running ahead for much of this race.
Right from the beginning, he had a double-digit lead. It got narrower, but they were confident as of today.
Which makes you wonder about the presidential numbers in Wisconsin, doesn't it?
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Because this is not just a Comey thing. I mean, when Johnson is winning, this is a much deeper thing. There's something wrong with the models of the pollings, or there's something, I don't know what the problem is, but it's not just one thing. This is a big Republican surge, and so that makes me think it's more issue-based than, or something, because it's probably not a late swing.
Yeah, I mean, only 14% of voters said they decided within the last week, and they did go to Trump, but it wasn't like they went to Trump 60-40. It was, 59 or 56 or 54. So I think that you can argue that something here was sitting there all along. And so for And I have to call myself out here for all of those folks who said, well, you know, there's this hidden vote here. There's these voters that aren't getting picked up, or maybe they're not telling pollsters the truth. We didn't pick it up in anything, online polls, phone call polls, anything that could pick up any sort of hidden vote, never found it. And yet here we are today looking at numbers that just didn't exist.
You know, just listening to that conversation you've been having, I can't help but think about Republican voters that I've been talking to around the country recently telling me, don't believe the polls, don't believe the polls. Now, people always say that, but looks like they were onto something.
You know, Stephen Bannon, who runs Breitbart, had a theory of this race. And it was that there was this hidden white vote and that they would turn out in these large numbers. I can't stand Breitbart, but I think you have to give credit that his theory of the race is proving certainly more true than my theory of the race. And other races would have indicated.
Donald Trump as being seen by a largely white electorate as an agent for change. Get rid of the status quo, get rid of what we're seeing in Washington. I will change things and help you out.
And that was clearly part of your reporting over the last few days. Jeffrey Brown, thank you, and we'll come back to you in a little while. For now, let's check in with our John Yang, who is at Clinton headquarters. John, what are you seeing and hearing?
It's a little bit quieter here, Judy. It's a very large crowd, but they can be very quiet sometimes. The only times you get a cheer is when a state is called for Clinton. They sort of rotate the networks here. They go to whichever network is making calls, or if one of those networks that's on the big screen comes to their correspondent here, and then there's a big cheer to show that there is life in this party. But it is Jeffrey said there's pleasant surprise at the New York Hilton. I'd say here at the Javits Center there is surprise, but it's not pleasant. And I've got to say, I haven't been able to reach anyone with the campaign for a little bit now, but Florida has to have been a blow to this campaign. They always said that they had many paths to 270 and that they could get there without Ohio. They could get there without North Carolina, but they were counting on Florida, and they kept talking to us about the Florida ground game, the early voting with Latinos and with African Americans, and saying that that would nail the door shut for Donald Trump, that there was no way he could get to 270 without Florida. Well, now he's got it. He's got a pathway, but Clinton still has a pathway as well. But here at the Javits Center, they're settling in for a long night. They're still looking at the numbers in Philadelphia City itself, looking at the black turnout there, looking at the suburbs, white women, suburban women with college degrees. They were hoping for. They're looking at those areas. But as I say, I haven't been able to reach anyone with the campaign for a while now.
Are people there starting to realize that there could be a loss in their future in the next hour and a half or two?
I think they realize it, but they don't think it's inevitable. They think that they do have a path. They think that they're hoping on Nevada. They're hoping on Michigan. We're getting more numbers out of Wayne County. There was a jump or a narrowing of the margin of Trump's lead in Michigan when we got more numbers out of Wayne County. Also the large Arab American population in I think it's Macomb or Oakland counties. Dearborn. But I think that they realize they have more paths, but they also realize that the door is still open for Donald Trump.
John Yang at Hillary Clinton's celebration, quote unquote, place tonight in New York City. Thank you, John, and we'll be coming back to you. And I'm hearing that we do have another state to call, Utah, for Donald Trump. Evan McMullen, Mark Shields. We thought maybe he might take it away, but it's going to be in the Donald Trump
It appeared that they went home to Donald Trump, from what I've been able to see on Utah. And I was surprised that Evan McMullen did not make a stronger stand.
It's interesting because much was made of the fact that Utah, of course, being the center of the Mormon church in this country, a heavily Mormon population, and we were reading, Andrew Gillespie, as of recently, that many Mormons were not comfortable with Donald Trump.
And it still appears to be the case. The difference seems to be gender. So where we see the differences are amongst men and women for Donald Trump. Donald Trump nearly gets about 8 percentage points more amongst men than he does among women. And Evan McMullin actually is probably going to get about 20% of the overall vote in the state. So where Trump actually ends up pushing ahead is that more men decided that they would put those differences aside and vote for him.
Nationally, she's behind African Americans from his performance by 5 points, Latinos by 6 points, Asians by 8 points. So if this was going to be the great showdown between the emerging electorate and the old model white electorate, he's performing as well and better than Mitt Romney, and she's underperforming President Obama.
The idea that you see a white surge, I think, is false, because you actually have 2 points less of white vote here. But you also have, again, you have 6 or 7% of this electorate voting other. And if you look at she's got 37% of the white vote. He's got 58% of the white vote. Romney got 59%.
You're talking about nationally?
Not nationally, 59% of the white vote nationally. He is not necessarily off of where Romney was with the white vote nationally, but that protest vote right now, particularly among younger voters, is absolutely killing her.
I'm looking at Wisconsin, and 67% of the vote in, he's up by 2.9. And so he might not even need Michigan.
Yep.
He just has to win one of those two.
Right.
And both of them look good for him. So that might be those are the two, that's the region of the night. Well, we'll be watching those two. I think that's where it'll all hang.
Everybody thought 4 or 5 hours ago that we were going to be covering the victory of Hillary Clinton. And one of the premises, as Amy Walter said, was all the pollsters have told us this notion of a shy vote, of people who won't tell us what they're doing, or that are somehow hidden away from us, is not right. And when you consider how many people made up their minds long ago, it isn't Jim Comey, and it isn't the last 4 or 5 days. There are 2 other quick points I want to make. One is, what do we think Bernie Sanders and his followers are thinking right now? Because Hillary Clinton was the default choice of the Democratic Party establishment. Bernie Sanders demonstrated in the primaries that there was a very large cohort of Democrats that wanted something else. She won fair and square, but she came into this race with an awful lot of liabilities that I think the Clinton campaign assumed would be overwhelmed by Trump's, which is why we know how much they were rooting for Trump. And the question, I think, now is, if Trump actually wins, and let me be the first to offer a poker analogy, Clinton has to draw to an inside straight. Somebody had to say it, so I did. If she loses, the battle within the Democratic Party over what happened and where it goes next is going to be intense, to put it mildly. The Democratic Party went with the safe choice, or the consensus choice, or the choice of the insiders. And now what we have, if Trump wins, is a Washington completely under Republican control. The Supreme Court now goes 5-4 on the conservative side. And I think they will be pointing to the Democratic Party insiders to say, you gave us a candidate. The only candidate we could have put up who Trump could have beaten was Hillary Clinton.
Whether Donald Trump wins tonight or not, he is certainly giving Hillary Clinton a much bigger run for the money than anybody expected, and she may lose. The deficit under a Donald Trump administration is way bigger than under a
and
Democrat.
I think what this event underlines is we no longer have a traditional left-right race.
Yep.
We have an open and closed race. You're for open globalization, meritocracy, you're for closed. And I'm reminded there have been a whole bunch of polling errors over the last couple of years in Greece, Israel with Netanyahu, the UK Cameron election, the Brexit, the Trump. In each case, they've underpolled the closed side of that equation, the people who are suspicious of globalization. And so this is a global wave that we are missing, and Trump happened to be leading it.
And the news is that Donald Trump is the projected winner in the Hawkeye state, Iowa. This is a state that Barack Obama won both times in 2008 and 2012. But in 2016, the Democrat Hillary Clinton losing to the Republican Donald Trump.
We could be watching the greatest political upset in American history.
Yeah, it did.
And there are small ways to look at it. Why was Clinton? I just saw from Ron Brownstein from The Atlantic that she paid 2 visits to Wisconsin in the last few months. So that could turn out to be a very bad decision. But I just think it's a bigger, now it just looks like a bigger thing, that there is a tidal wave of revolt against the global economy, against the wave of immigration we've seen all over the last 30 years, the results of deindustrialization, even though the unemployment rate, when you add in the people who are out of the labor force, you can get a very high number of families that are really disrupted. Yeah. Family breakdown, the fact that Christians in the last 4 or 5 years have felt completely under assault in this country because some of the Supreme Court decisions. And so you can add up a lot of factors. It takes a lot of factors to make something this big. Yep. But this is a big moment, and a lot of factors are in play.
You got to hold Wisconsin. She's got to hold Pennsylvania. She's got to hold Michigan. If she holds those, she's probably going to be okay. But Wisconsin right now is troubling.
All right, we have a call to make in the state of Georgia. The projected winner is Donald Trump. We've actually, a lot of us are surprised it's taken this long. The polls closed in the Peach State at 7 o'clock.
Well, Iowa is more rural. Iowa doesn't have a big population center like Detroit or Milwaukee. Iowa doesn't have as many suburban women because you don't have as many big urban areas with big suburbs around those. So all those were going to protect and insulate Hillary Clinton from what was going to happen to her in Iowa. Obviously, that doesn't necessarily look like the case right now.
There are two anxieties. There's an economic anxiety, and there was a cultural anxiety. It's a cultural anxiety about the country I know is changed. It's changing. They're making fun of the things I care about, whether it's patriotism or religion, traditional values. It's all moving so fast.
And that's tied in with immigration and a number of other things.
Yeah, and I do think that has contributed to certainly the environment that we're seeing expressed.
It's obviously a jubilant mood among the Trump campaign staffers right now at Trump Tower. They're waiting on Wisconsin and Michigan. They're stressing they think if they get Wisconsin and perhaps one vote in Maine, the Maine 2nd District, they think that's it. So they're waiting, not calling it yet, but very close in their mind.
Judy, you know, the financial markets are certainly responding towards a Trump presidency. Right now, the Dow futures are probably down about 1,000 points, which is about 5.5%. That could obviously change overnight. And, you know, they're looking at statistical models, say from the New York Times, that has a 95% Trump presidency. I mean, this is almost a Brexit-like event. We'll find out tomorrow morning when the market actually opens.
So, all bets are off.
So, Stuart Stevens, the internal conversation of the Republican Party right now is, well, this guy delivered results. He got us to a place where we couldn't get going the route that we used to go.
Well, I think that's true. I don't consider that encouraging. I think what's undervalued here is, you know, Donald Trump went out and said a lot of things that we as a society have decided should be unacceptable.
In many ways, the San Francisco Bay Area is the bastion of liberal thought in the country, compared to what we're talking about, waiting for Wisconsin hanging in the balance, waiting for the base core Trump voter that has given him an incredible performance tonight.
Absolutely. I mean, we were so confident, Labor was so confident in California that Clinton was going to win that they were flooding Nevada with volunteers to make calls and precinct walk and those kinds of things. And I don't think that confidence was misplaced. I mean, we'll know better as more votes come in. But clearly, you know, this was a state, thinking back to June, the primary, where Bernie Sanders gave Hillary Clinton a real run for her money. He got about 45% of the vote. She obviously won. But you saw that discontent that people felt with Hillary Clinton. I think there were obviously some concerns about the level of enthusiasm, especially among African-American voters. The thought was that she could make up for that with more votes from Latinos. But I think perhaps, as you've been discussing, what was missed is the elevated support and enthusiasm for Donald Trump among working class white folks and Caucasians without a college education.
The very last Clinton campaign call was, we're outperforming with white millennials. Obama lost them, we're winning them. We're outperforming with Latinos. We're outperforming with Asians. We're outperforming with white suburban
What were they
voters.
basing that on?
They were basing it on what they were seeing in the early vote and what they were seeing in their own
polling.
polling.
But they're not. I mean,
they're not.
To me, the storyline really here is if you look at his percentages, I mean, they're not that far off of Mitt Romney's. They came back in line. She has not held the Obama coalition the way a lot of us thought she would.
Brexit was like the Spanish-American War compared to World War I. This is a much bigger global
Yep.
story.
Yep.
This is a
That's
gigantic
right.
global story.
Yep.
And America's role in the world is going to change if Trump wins. And
Yep.
I'm still not certain. I can see a lot of path, or at least one path for Clinton to pull this out. But Obamacare, gone. A lot of the immigration policy utterly transformed. So a lot of big things are about to happen in this country if Trump wins.
Canada's immigration website has apparently crashed online, suggesting that a number of Americans are looking at moving to Canada. We don't know much beyond that at this point. We've reported earlier the financial markets have reacted, the futures markets, by plunging, at least at this point. We don't know what's going to happen. The election has not been called yet. You can see there. At this point, it's 244 electoral votes for Donald Trump and 209 for Hillary Clinton. You need 270 to become president. But Amy Walter, as we were saying a minute ago, the path for Hillary Clinton has narrowed considerably.
I mean, we're getting also to a place where Hillary Clinton could end up winning the popular vote and losing the electoral vote.
The climate change consequences that are in the very long term, the Supreme Court is also trending online right now, because that's sort of the next 30 years of medium-term impact that the next president will have.
Environmental, certainly the Supreme Court touches every aspect of our lives, Mark Shields.
Absolutely. And given the gridlock in Congress and really the non-productivity of the Congress, the court has assumed an even larger role in national decision-making and national policy.
So the possibility of a Donald Trump victory tonight is roiling, and we've been talking about this. World financial markets, Asian stocks down sharply. Japan's Nikkei average off nearly 4%. Overnight stock futures for Wall Street are down more than 4.5%. The dollar has dropped sharply against the Japanese yen and against the euro, and the price of gold is up sharply, which is, Stuart Stevens, what we see happen when people get worried about economic stability, right?
Yeah, I'm always amused with this. We say we're going to have an anti-globalist economy. I'm not sure what that means.
Are we going to go back to
the gold standard?
Is a good example of that. Listen, I think that it's troubling to these economic markets because I think it's going to be bad for American jobs and business.
We've been on the air for 6 hours, and we still don't know who the next president of the United States is. It was thought, David Brooks, it was thought that we might have an idea by now if Hillary Clinton were doing well, but we also knew all along that this could be a long night.
Jeff, this is sort of suspended animation here, but the candidate whose party you're at is definitely in the lead.
A little less suspended animation here, I think. In this room, they've called Wisconsin for Donald Trump. So this room feels like it's pretty much there or almost there. Not quite, and of course it hasn't gone all the way, but there's certainly that expectation. More people on the floor, more of those hats I was telling you about, more hugs and high fives, more drinking go behind me, although that may just be because it's midnight. I want to throw in one more thing that I've talked to people about that you guys were all talking about. I think it was Mark who brought up the tone, the kind of language used in this campaign. Just coming from being out on the campaign for a couple of days, some really ugly language, some really nasty stuff said. Personally, just having talked to a lot of people out there, thinking about this as I was, listening to the campaign and then being here, that this language thing, this cultural issue that you've all been talking about, the distinctions, the way that we can barely talk to each other, and much of the talk that I've heard, we've all heard, has been so hateful, to my mind, a very unusual way. I think that has to be an issue going forward.
One of Donald Trump's favorite lines is when he points to the news media, who are always in a roped-in area in the middle of a big crowd, and he said, these are the most dishonest people anywhere, the news media. And then the crowd turns and they raise their hands and shake their fists and glower at us.
Well, I'll tell you, Judy, I had that experience a few times the last few days. There's an element of theater to it, of course. A lot of the people I was talking to people all around us in the pen and having nice conversations with people. And then as soon as Donald Trump says that, everybody turns and, starts yelling at us. So there's an element of theater to it, but that's not to say that in some cases there hasn't been some menace. But I don't even mean about the media. I just mean the general tone, candidate versus candidate, that's going to be hard to deal with, I think.
Here it is, just a little after midnight. What's the mood now over there?
It is very quiet here. It is. They've been, on the big screen. I was saying earlier that they were trying to they would sort of playing campaign ads that keep the energy level up. Now they're playing sort of highlights, or they have been playing highlights from the convention, Hillary Clinton's acceptance speech, and there has been no reaction whatsoever. It's very quiet. People are looking a little glum, some looking disbelieving as this sinks in here. Although I have to admit, not a lot of people have left. There was a little bit of an outflow about half an hour ago. I can't tell whether it was because of the hour or because of the results, but they still are here. They're watching the television screens, watching Donald Trump's vote count in the popular vote and in the Electoral College rise, and still sitting here sort of very quietly and numb, sort of in disbelief.
And John, are you still are the Clinton advisors, aides, are they still missing, or have they resurfaced in the room?
They have been missing from the room. They have been incommunicado. As far as I'm concerned, as far as from me, I think that there may be others in the room who have better, perhaps have better pipelines in than I do. But I've not heard anything back from anyone for a while now. There could be a lot of questions asked if this continues as it seems to be going tonight.
John Yang reporting for us from Hillary Clinton's headquarters, and we're going to be coming back to you as well as we wait for more results. Hari, it's now 6-7 minutes after midnight. We wait for the states that haven't come in yet. We're watching just below where I am on your screen. You can see the states we're still looking at. Some of these where you see the green dot, those states are called, but here's the national map. Right now it's Donald Trump 244, Hillary Clinton 209, but you still see a number of states out.
You know, when we keep talking about what this election was about, one thing that really struck me in these exit polls, when they asked which candidate quality mattered most, the number one issue can bring about change, 39%, and Donald Trump won those voters with 83%.
But the guy, this is my personal opinion, doesn't know about policy and doesn't know about the facts you need to know to govern, and that will be an interesting phenomenon.
The country was on the verge of possibly electing the first woman who ever who was the nominee of a major political party, and it may not happen. Does that say something about us as a country? Does it say something about women in this country?
I think what we're seeing is, quite frankly, race trumps gender. I think there's very few things. I think, we can make the economic case, but economic anxiety has long been connected to group power in this country. And when you look at the sort of things that Trump has said that shocked many of us, and you think about sort of, does this now get worse? Does the polarization and the racial polarization now go worse? Is it okay now to say the sort of things about people of color and about women that he has said?
Authoritarianism has been rising around the world for the past 10 years, and we've seen it in Greece. We've seen it in a lot of places where there's no racial element. Now, there's a racial element here, and the way Trump talks makes race relations work, and it normalizes bigotry. But I cling to the idea there still is a large economic element, just because we've seen it around the world in a lot of different circumstances.
Could be both.
The party allowed itself to normalize these things that Donald Trump was saying. And, we had not done that before. I mean, in Missouri, when we had a Senate candidate who said unfortunate things about rape, the party distanced itself. And I think that a lot of this responsibility needs to lie with that willful turning away from what we know should not be said and accepting it with this sort of Faustian bargain.
I don't know if we can show it, but the results in Pennsylvania, not final, but we're showing that Donald Trump has now pulled ahead. And we don't know how much is left. Maybe we'll get to that.
Pittsburgh has got sort of 98% out. So a lot of these Democratic areas, they're almost done. So it's not good news that she's now behind by 10,000. Still close, but it's almost done.
And so it's a scarier time. And people are scared, and they're turning to some sort of authoritarian personality types.
Well, one of the exit polls early today said that what are the qualities that you want in a president? And strength was one of the highest rankings. Jeff Greenfield, we want to pull you in from our studios in New York.
A name popped into my head a few hours ago, Silvio Berlusconi. I spent some time at the University of Chicago with a prominent Italian journalist who said all along, Trump's going to win this thing, because I was in Italy when Berlusconi won. An outsider, a very brash, larger-than-life figure with personality quirks or defects equal to or greater than Trump's. And because he was not of that system, he was able to stay in power for 10 years despite numerous attempts literally to put him in prison. And there is something here about the nature of Trump, the fact that he became known as the executive in charge of The Apprentice, odd as that may seem to many of us, I think can't be discounted. That people were taking their clues as to what kind of president he might be from a television show. There is a part of this country that the political journalistic enterprise, or much of it, simply is totally disconnected from. Whether these people weren't talking to pollsters, whether the pollsters didn't know how to find them, whether they didn't show up in likely voter samples, that I leave that to those experts. But I do think that there is a gap in this country, and the people on the other side of that gap from the insiders turn out to be much bigger and much angrier than the insiders ever realized.
So maybe we should be looking at ourselves as we sit around this table.
Absolutely.
I think that's, you bet.
Including
You
all
bet.
of us here.
You bet.
100%. You and everybody else. Right. In the state of Nevada, 6 electoral votes go to Hillary Clinton. You can see with just 32% of the vote in, between the exit polls and other projections, it is reliably believed that Hillary Clinton will come out the winner when they count all the votes. What is it that we missed, all of us sitting around this table?
Just coming to Jeff's point about Berlusconi, I had an Italian friend say that, yes, we elected a Berlusconi, but you're the United States of America. You can't do that. I mean, we can do it. It's a circus in Italy. I mean, so, it's kind of funny.
They go through prime ministers every year or so.
And whatever, but you are the United States of America. And it is sobering, and it truly is. I mean, it isn't Greece. We aren't Greece, with all due respect to Greece, and we aren't the United Kingdom. We have been the beacon of the world, and this is a defining change.
2,000 vote difference now in Pennsylvania.
Where everything seems to be shifting. The assumptions that you make coming into this, as I said, 70% white vote, Nevada, Colorado, Virginia, that sets up for a Democratic win.
But what I'm hearing, we may be having a call, but I'm going to come back to, is that right? We do have a call to make? We don't. Stuart Stevens, what is it, though, that these Americans who feel they've been ignored, disrespected, what more do they want from Washington? What do they want from their government?
Well, we'll find out, probably.
I mean, I think there's some fundamental American types of versions of this nationalism that are definitely rooted in our racial history. But there is something about people feeling that elites, and I guess we're all elites, don't listen to other people, and that we condescend and that we think we know everything. And then this was their time to get it back. So there might be the backlash behind the Obama presidency, behind the Clinton candidacy, but then there's also this idea that people have played us for fools, and now is our chance to teach them a lesson. I've done my research, and I've had to do ethnography, and I've had to do interviews. Sometimes I've had to listen to people. Usually I'm listening to African Americans say things that on the surface don't necessarily pass the test of what I would call politically correct statements. Then it's a question of listening beneath the surface to actually hear what they're really saying. Sometimes people don't bring the same vocabulary that you or I would bring to the table, but they're saying things that are really important. So now is the opportunity for us to sit and actually hear get past the veneer and actually hear what people are saying and then address that. But I think Stuart's right. There's a leadership problem, and there's, I guess, a teaching type of problem because we don't agree about facts. There are lots of things that we don't agree with, and therefore, it's actually really hard to get people to kind of come to the same conclusions and draw consensus.
Where I bump up against this idea, it's elite. The Latinos who voted in Nevada, these weren't Harvard grads. These weren't elites. African Americans weren't elite, most of them. So what is the unifying quality here? I would suggest race. And I think that it is able to speak to something that resonated in people that we should face. And again, I don't think it will be our best moment.
Is manufacturing worse off in Michigan now than it was 8 years ago?
Oh, yeah. I think, well, maybe not than 8 years ago, but remember, these are folks that have seen, in the last 20 years, have seen a lot of their automotive manufacturing move out of the states. Some of it has gone down south. A lot of it has gone to Mexico. Ford Motor just announced that they were moving all of their small car production to Mexico. And so, it's not 8 years. It is a process of 15 to 20 years where Michigan has seen much of its manufacturing leave. And there's lots of reasons. It's a very complicated issue. It's not just trade, it's productivity and those kinds of things. But overall, these workers and others in the state believe that, the country's moving in a direction that they just don't agree with.
Congressman, we're sitting around the table talking about what's happened tonight because, as you know, so many of the projections were that Hillary Clinton was likely to win this election. And now, of course, it's much closer and taking longer to know. And the conversation is around how much of this has to do, of Donald Trump's success has to do with economic factors, which you just described around trade and around job loss, and how much of it is cultural, having to do with frankly, some of the language we've heard in this campaign, some of the innuendo, a discomfort, frankly, with some of what we've heard from Donald Trump himself.
Well, I think whether it's from Donald Trump or whether it's from Hillary Clinton, I think that there are some of those cultural issues at play. There's no doubt, though, that if those are code words for, are people concerned about the immigration issue? Yeah, they are concerned about immigration. Are they concerned about Syrian refugees? Yes, they are concerned. But I think overall, it's not about, that people in Michigan dislike immigrants, but they believe that immigrants are not having a positive impact on their opportunity for economic prosperity.
When the voter votes for our side, the voter is enlightened and thoughtful and sensitive and generous and patriotic. But when the voter votes on the other side, mean-spirited, narrow-minded, bigoted, and intolerant.
What is it that, when they say they're not satisfied with Hillary Clinton they like Barack Obama, 56% of them are saying he's done a good job. They approve of his, but they don't want somebody who's going to continue what he's done.
I mean, does anybody sitting here think that Mexico's going to pay for a wall and that there's going to be a wall in 4 years? I mean, does anybody really think we're going to put a 45% tariff on these things? No, it's not going to happen. Are we going to withdraw from NATO or make them pay this? No.
Do perhaps mainstream Republicans or Democrats try to now figure out, how do you put me in as a check and balance 2 years from now against whatever President Trump might be?
Well, I think the reality of the next 2 years will determine that. I think there'll be some eager to do it, but I think we have
if
no.
He's elected, right?
If he's elected, if he becomes president, we have no idea how he will rule. I mean, he has been contradictory in his positions, his policy positions. But coming back to your question, Judy, about what do they want respect. They want attention. I mean,
but what does that mean? What does that mean?
Look at us, okay? I mean, look at what we discuss. We discuss the elites. We discuss the changes. We discuss cultural issues and social issues, and we do it very approvingly. And there's just sort of a disregard or an indifference. The very books that you mentioned, that these people are strangers in their own land, and that they feel whatever he's going to do, he's going to get the guys who've been getting us. Okay, he's not going to. There's no specific agenda, but he's not those people who have been making the decisions, whether it's the elite opinion makers, whether it's us or whoever it is, the New York Times. There's just a sense that they've been patronized, yep. they've been put aside, and the argument for trade is compelling at an intellectual level, and it's a killer. It's a killer in Akron, Ohio. It's a killer in Youngstown, Ohio. And he gives a false promise. He says, I'm going to bring back steel. He's not going to bring back steel jobs. I mean, those jobs have been lost to automation.
He did 1 point better among white voters than Mitt Romney did. She did markedly worse among non-white voters. And so there is something going on that goes beyond just this white working class angst. She did not perform as well as they had thought she was going to in the inner Philadelphia suburbs, where you have the suburban white women. They did not perform as well. But just looking, and this is a very small sample, African-American men, she got only 80% of African-American men. 20% either went for other or for Trump.
There's normalizing. There was not any admission that any of the things that Trump had said were blatantly racist, right? That he completely, that's not the worldview that he has. So what does the Republican Party do to, if it wants to say to a vast amount of America that that's not the party that we are going forward? How do you do that?
I have no idea. And I think the fact that this was allowed and not called out more, I keep going back to it. I think that's very troubling.
I would have asked that even if Trump was not in the position that he was in at the moment. Andrea?
One of the things that's interesting, I want to go back to the Kansas Secretary of State, who was on a couple of hours ago, who also challenged this idea. And he challenged the notion of even recognizing group identity. That's where the problem is, or the impasse. That's a problem, I think, in the long term that's still going to affect the Republican Party. But because they refuse to acknowledge the fact that people do group and that they vote in block behaviors, that it makes it harder to try to convince people that, hey, this is racist, that's subtle, that's a code word, and that allows for this type of contestation that actually usually ends up having us spinning our wheels.
At least I want to shake them and say, but he said this, he did this, he abused this, but they didn't see that. And so there was an inability to be morally offended. And there was a moral numbness, in my view, that went along with that. And that's partly because partisanship is so high, it shouts out everything else.
You know, you're going to have some southern states that are almost a majority minority, and we can't pretend that it has not heightened that sense of tribalism that we've had in this country, because all of a sudden it is a threat to white supremacy and white power here, and we're getting to a point in the country where we're going to have to share power. And the white vote, for the first time, you know, for Barack Obama, overwhelmingly lost the white vote. He was overwhelmingly not the choice of white voters. So we now have to share power, and I think that's a very different variable between what was happening then and what's happening now. I think now the wolf is at the door for a lot of these voters.
Well, you know, Judy, this might shock you, but there's a lot of people across this country who say, why is it that the major broadcast polls had Hillary Clinton up 4 to 6 points before this evening? You have to look at that process and say, why did people get this so wrong? Why did they get these battleground states so wrong? Why a couple weeks ago did people say this race was over? Why did, when I did television interviews this morning and yesterday, did people, when the cameras were off, say, how are you going to take it when you lose tomorrow? Will Donald Trump concede on election night? You know, that type of coverage bothers people. And I think the American people were sending a message to the pollsters and to the professional political class, hey, we get to determine who our president is. And let's face it, there was a silent Trump vote that didn't show up in the polls, and Republicans and conservatives came home to Donald Trump.
You said there's a silent Trump vote, so you're saying people just did not level with pollsters? Is that what you're saying?
You all tell me. I mean, why were the polls for NBC, CBS, ABC, CNN, why were they so disastrously off? It's either that the respondents weren't being candid, or they weren't contacting those voters that had been excited by the Trump message, and they didn't get registered in the polls. Maybe I'm not smart enough tonight to know what happened, but one of those things happened, and I think we have to look at ourselves, everybody who's involved in the media, and say, why didn't we call this race accurately?
Well, I'm just trying to understand, when he says everything is rigged, you're saying he's referring to the news media being rigged, basically.
Yeah, I think that was his overwhelming sentiment, which is that, look, you're not being leveled with. You're not being leveled with by Washington, D.C., and you're not being leveled with the people who are covering the race. And I don't know why most people got this so wrong, but I think it's great in a democracy that the voters in the end have the final say.
people break late, right? I mean, the polling's not going to catch everyone who breaks late. We do have people in this race, in campaigns, who break late. Clearly, the late breakers broke heavily for him. She got about where she was in all the national polls.
John Yang at Hillary Clinton headquarters in New York City. Tell us what's going on there.
It's gotten a little more subdued here, Judy, in the past, really in the past half hour, 45 minutes. I've seen some fun big donors, big Democratic donors on the floor here, sort of consoling one another, consoling others. There seems to be a little bit more of disbelief, people looking at each other, not quite believing what's going on. The faithful are still here. There's still a pretty good-sized crowd, although I have to admit some of them have taken to be sitting down now. It looks like a very well-dressed sit-in protest here in some sections of this floor. They have some moments of spirit. They started chanting as they were listening to one of the television networks discuss a possible Trump administration. The chant came up, "Love Trump's hate." But this has really sort of become I don't want to say awake. It hasn't quite gotten to that level, but it has gotten more subdued, a little more somber, and as I say, people beginning to console themselves, patting each other on the backs, hugging each other, and more people have started to leave. We're told that we will expect to see her here, hear her win or lose, but we've not heard anything from the campaign. They've been maintaining radio silence. And by the way, the Javits Center management says there is another show. There is a convention, ironically, the National Association of Broadcasters, booked in here tomorrow. The first session is at 8:30, and the drop-dead time, they say, to turn this place around is 2 a.m.
Uh-oh. Wow. You mean 2 a.m. in about 45 minutes from now?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
The very best that Democrats can do is hope to pick up New Hampshire, which we still haven't heard called yet, and Missouri, and then that would get Democrats still short.
The soundtrack of Donald Trump rallies, interestingly, we haven't heard anything here, but the two songs that stand out in my mind, "You Can't Always Get What You Want," Rolling Stones, right? So that always sounds odd to me, like, why is that a rally song? You can't always get what you want. Now, the tagline is, if you try sometime, you'll get what you need. It sort of leaves you wondering, well, what is it that you need? It's still a kind of odd song. But the funnier one, to my mind, is Luciano Pavarotti singing the famous aria, Nessun dorme, right? In my Italian that I remember, no one sleeps. No one will sleep. It's one of the most famous, arias in opera. And I can't help but think at 1:20, folks, I don't know if we'll sleep. But it does end, very famous last line, and Pavarotti does it, vincerò, which means I will win.
In Ohio, Delaware County, Hillary Clinton did 4 points better. Okay, that's nice. She did a little bit better than Obama did. But in Mahoning County, which is Youngstown, she did 12 points worse. In Pennsylvania, she did a little bit better in Chester, Montgomery County. Those are the suburbs around Philadelphia. She did 12 points worse in Wilkes-Barre. She did a little worse in Philadelphia. Right now, this is not all the votes counted, but she's doing about 2 points, getting about 2 points fewer than Obama did.
I'd never seen this before. Maybe others have.
What are you pointing?
With it marital status, that Hillary Clinton carried married women, unmarried men, and unmarried women. The only subgroup that Donald Trump carried was married men, and he carried them by 21 points.
We can call Pennsylvania. Donald Trump, the victor, is the projected winner with a total of 264. That puts him at 264 electoral votes. That is just 6 electoral votes away from becoming president of the United States.
I think it's part of that snapback, authoritarianism, barriers, tribalism, insecurity producing a desire for people to close in.
I think part of the story here is this. When you look at, I think is that Obama coalition. And for a long time we asked, could she hold the Obama coalition. When you look at her doing, 54% among, millennials, those under 30, we got 60% of that vote. I think that is where the story is. And because when I look at Trump's numbers, again, I think some of this talk about her winning Republicans was fool's gold. Because clearly those Republicans came home, because you look at these numbers, they're in line with what Mitt Romney did. I think the story here is she did not hold that Obama coalition the way she needed to. Because if you had told me, I think Amy said this earlier, that this electorate would be 2 points less white than it was for Obama, and younger voters would turn out at the same rate that they did for Obama, because they're still at 19%, that she would win this.
It was much harder to come up with positive messages for Hillary Clinton, because her message was, I'm not that other guy. And that wasn't satisfying enough. And especially for black millennials, young black activists, people who were thinking about Black Lives Matter and their disenchantment with the Democratic Party, they were saying, we refuse to accept a party that's just going to tell us we're going to be okay with incremental change.
Tomorrow morning, it's not already happening. The Congressional Black Caucus and Hispanic Caucus, they're going to be asking, how much money did you spend chasing this mythical white woman swing voter that you didn't improve on, versus how much did you spend trying to expand the electorate and talking to younger Hispanic and talking to younger African Americans? I assure you that will start in a couple of hours.
I mean, if the party's going to get kicked out in 14 minutes at the Javits Center and they have to turn that place over again, does she come out and make any sort of a gesture, a concession speech, or are the lawyers saying, well, here are the places, it's too close to call, what are the triggers for the recall and the recount?
I would imagine if I were advising Hill the campaign, I would still look at some of these places out. You've still got almost roughly 10% of the vote still out in a place like Wisconsin. I'd say wait. Just hold on.
There's no point in conceding.
Okay, there's a little bit of news here. The pool covering Hillary Clinton is reporting that the Clinton campaign chair has just left Hillary Clinton's hotel to go to the Javits Center, but that she is not coming.
Yeah.
So that's the interim step, I guess.
I think you thank them and you say that returns aren't in, but we will certainly wait until they are, and we want all votes to be counted.
Not only did we did not see this electorate, partly because we weren't in their feeds. We weren't in the same. We were seeing a different world, perhaps, and maybe all the pollsters had a different type of feed that had her up 2 points or 4 points or 6 points. I mean, how much is this because we're becoming more insular in surrounding ourselves with people who think like us?
Hispanic men went for 33% of them went for Trump. Now, we're going to have a lot of explanations about that. Frankly, there may be a hint of misogyny in that number too. But there are these numbers that lurk around when we finally get them, and people like Amy Walter actually put them together, may tell us the fuller picture of just what happened tonight.
I would suggest the fact that he's running against a woman is coming.
Is a big piece of it.
So
we come back to a woman.
I think this, when you look at men who are a certain segment of them, certainly not all of them, but I think that there is some, I would suspect, some residual reluctance to have a female president, female commander-in-chief.
Well, speaking for myself, when the people who we don't like win, we tend to psychoanalyze the people who, why did they vote for that person, or we do a moral evaluation. But when our side wins, we say, well, we were right on the issues.
Yeah.
and so it could be that Trump's issues were actually really important.
They keep talking about Hillary Clinton's unpopular and everything, but Donald Trump was more unpopular.
Yes, he was. That's right.
So,
I agree.
We are told that at Clinton headquarters, John Podesta, who's the chairman of the Clinton campaign, is about to speak. Not there yet, so we're gonna be ready to go there. We are now less than a minute away from 2 a.m. in the east. So we have another presidential call to make, and that is the far northeastern state of Maine. Hillary Clinton is the winner, but because of the peculiar way that they apportion electoral votes in Maine, if you win one of the congressional districts, which Donald Trump did, he will get one of Maine's 4 electoral votes. 3 go to Hillary Clinton. Now let's go directly to Hillary Clinton headquarters event in New York City, and to John Podesta, her campaign chairman.
It's been a long night, and it's been a long campaign. But I could say we can wait a little longer, can't we? They're still counting votes, and every vote should count. Several states are too close to call, so we're not going to have anything more to say tonight.
He said they may have more to say later, or will have more to say later. He also said that every vote should count. Whether that means that they're going to ask for recounts in certain areas, we don't know. So we'll have to see. I think part of it is they need to get out of here and clear this building so that the National Association of Broadcasters can move in tomorrow. But now we'll have to see what happens tomorrow.
And John, it looks like they're actually leaving. They're taking John Podesta's advice and walking out. Is that right?
That's actually even before he finished, I saw a number of people starting to head for the exits. And yes, they are moving out at a pretty steady pace here. It looks like they are emptying the building, and so that they'll continue on tomorrow.
We can also say now that in Nebraska, Donald Trump gets the state's final and 5th electoral vote. That brings his total to 266. Again, 270 is the magic number. Hillary Clinton is at 218.
So we wait. I don't think, Amy Walter, this is what the Clinton people, you see that scene at the Javits Center, that wasn't the scene at all that they had in mind that it was going to look like at this hour of the night.
Though, given where this race is headed, and this is certainly coming up a lot on Twitter right now, the fact that they said go home, that there won't be a concession speech tonight, when there may very well be a Donald Trump acceptance speech, is in somewhat of poor form. Certainly, if Trump had lost and said, we're going to wait till all the votes are counted, and then left, he would have been pounced on for not conceding. It's true, we still have ways to go. The race has not been called yet. It is 2 o'clock in the morning, but with where the signs are headed, this is going to be, if indeed Wisconsin, Michigan, even just Arizona. If Arizona comes home, it's over.
Fox News, which is being followed here, has not yet called it, but they have called Wisconsin. So as soon as Fox calls Pennsylvania, that will put Trump over. And everybody in the crowd here keeps chanting, call it, call it, call it. I think they're so on edge here. Yeah. As I said last time I spoke, there was such a kind of air of anticipation and waiting that explains this kind of call it, like there's, it's like everybody's up here and waiting to explode. And they'd like to do that, but they haven't been able to do it yet. And of course, the John Podesta announcement at Clinton headquarters, a mile and a half away from where we are, that of course did not go over well here at all. That was met with very loud boos.
Okay, we have a call to make. The state that closed, where the polls just closed an hour and 15 minutes ago, Alaska, is going to Donald Trump. No surprise, 3 electoral votes, which will put him at 269.
He's within 1 point.
Electoral vote shy of becoming the next president. And we are also told that Donald Trump is on his way to the Hilton Hotel in New York, where our Jeffrey Brown is, and a lot of happy Trump people wearing red caps waiting to hear from him.
Politics is also about people, and you have to wonder what it is like right now where Bill and Hillary Clinton are. She's been pointing to the presidency in some sense, at least since she got to the Senate in 2000. Thought she was going to make it in 2008 and was defeated by this new, exciting figure. And now to lose to somebody like Donald Trump, who up until 7 hours ago was all considered to be the loser.
It is one thing to lose to Barack Obama, who is a natural, who's an exceptional, once-in-a-generation talent. But to lose to Donald Trump has to compound the hurt and the pain of losing. I mean, to lose to somebody that she beat 3 times in debates, make no mistake about it, that she confounded and confused on the floor, and to lose to him just after all of this, and to know that's the end of the line.
I have a lot of friends and family members who are extremely upset. I mean, I'm just getting a lot of people texting me who are completely bereft, weeping. It's tough to know what to say in these circumstances if you were a Clinton partisan. I guess the two things, we should have faith in the country, that it's a resilient country, and if your guy didn't win or your candidate didn't win, things do survive. And then the second thing, and just in moments of turmoil, just rest for a moment. Don't try to swim and let the world harden for a second. And there'll be plenty of time to react. But I'm just struck by my friends and family members who are completely, some of them devastated.
How is it possible that we could find that every single poll, every single model, every single smart person in America said that this was going to be a big election for Hillary Clinton? How could they possibly get that all wrong? Now, I don't know that there's a whole lot of celebrating. There are going to be pockets of celebration, but you've got a big percent of the electorate. What is it? He had 60% disapproval rating. This isn't like, woo.
I can tell you where they're celebrating, in Moscow.
The fix is in, that Moscow interfered with the elections.
And the intelligence community has said absolutely that that's who was behind the hacking of the DNC and John Podesta, who we just saw at Hillary Clinton's headquarters.
By not conceding tonight, by now embracing the language of being rigged, Democrats are now turning into what they were just criticizing 24 hours ago.
They're about to pull the plug on you there. Is that what's going on?
That's exactly right. At 2:30, this place turns into a pumpkin, a dark pumpkin. And people are streaming out. People are leaving. I tell you, as I saw some people leaving, people who I know who are Democratic donors and also Democratic officials, they seem pretty stoic, but some of them had brought their young daughters along. Daughters in their teens and early 20s, they had tears in their eyes. Clearly they had come looking forward to seeing the first woman be elected president of the United States, and now that dream has gone for them as well. And it was, I think, a little tougher on them than it may have been on their parents, at least from what I could see and what brief words I was able to exchange with them. Where the campaign says that they're only standing by John Podesta's statement that every vote deserves to be counted, and that they are looking at things across the country, and that we should stay tuned for tomorrow.
So as of 2:30,
Is that late at night?
no networks have called. AP hasn't called. Nobody's called as of 2:30, right?
Right.
Okay.
So we wait and we try to come up with something to say that's.
Is Donald Trump going to do something?
Well, Donald Trump
He's
is
supposed to be
on his way to the Hilton Hotel in Manhattan.
Is he?
And I don't think that's very far from Trump Tower. I don't remember the addresses in New York City, but they're pretty close together.
Very close.
The Associated Press is calling Wisconsin, so that puts him over the top. Donald Trump is the next president of the United States. We can project it on the basis of an Associated Press report that Donald Trump will win the state of Wisconsin. That is 10 more electoral votes, 269, 279. You need 270 to be president. Our next president will be Donald Trump.